Get ready for another video in Alex's garage. Alright, so today we're going to be putting the dash back in permanently. I just want to go over, before we put the dash in, last week we went over the dash sub-harness for the wiring. So today, before we go ahead and put the dash in, I want to go ahead and go through the main harness and the components that are connected to the firewall. Because, you know, once the dash is out, that's the only place where you can mess with those. And so I want to just kind of review it, so that in case you have dash out and you put a new wiring harness in, you can touch on all these bases. All right, so the wiring harness comes in from the engine compartment at an access point back here behind the windshield wiper engine. In order to actually take out the wiring harness, you do need to remove that that engine, or at least take this motor off of its mount, which is this little bracket right here. This little bracket right here, and it will fall down, and then you can get access to the wiring. It has a jack that you really can't mess up, but this is part of it. So first thing you need to do is get this jack connected and put that back in there. The next thing you'll notice is there are a couple of diodes. These little devices right here are very critical. Make sure when you're looking at these that you get these installed correctly, so that the flow of electricity goes the right direction. You'll see I have some green and pink and green and orange wires here. You trace those down on the wiring harness and you'll find where they go. They're connected to, looks like, red and white wires here. Yep. And those go back into the thing. You'll find some of these little loops that go around. Basically the wires are installed and then they're connected together. And so you can pretty much ignore these. Just make sure that they're not loose or anything. But moving down the line here, you'll see that a little branch of wires comes off, and this right here, see there's a little branch of wires that comes off on a little harness right here. This little connector has orange and green. These are doubled up wires so they can have more circuit. These are for the handbrake, and then you have this yellow and brown. Believe it or not, that's for the butt sensor. There's a little sensor under the driver's seat that will make this little thing buzz if you're not sitting down and you turn the ignition on. Then you have a purple and black wire. This is an accessory wire. Purple wires by rule are always hot. They're fused at the fuse box, and black is a ground. So I don't know exactly where that goes, but it goes back down through here. It's an accessory wire, these two wires right here. All right, so moving along, you have a bundle of wires. Now, when I had my wiring harness came with a bundle that didn't match my seatbelt buzzer. So I had to take my old seatbelt buzzer off and spliced all the wires in so that it would match. So you may have a situation like that. Just make sure you match the colors up, but that's where this goes. And this is the buzzer that will make noise when you put the car in the ignition. This purple and black bundle right here that comes off of that is the bundle that would normally go to the cigarette lighter. And I'm not going to have a cigarette lighter on here, but I've taken this hot wire, and again it's purple. Purple's always hot. This is a little bit thicker gauge, and the ground wire from this, which would have been in the cigarette lighter, and I've connected it to my adapter for the USB charger. USB charger is what I'm replacing the radio with. And we're going to be able to run our radios off of Bluetooth and cell phones. So it's I have another video on that. Make sure you check my feed, and you'll find how I'm installing USB chargers for that. So going back up here up top, you see the wires where they all split off and they come back. I had a video already on the layout of this main wiring harness. When I set these heater tubes, there was actually they were worn, and the wires had a wear mark, and the heater had a wear mark. And so what I did was I put some insulation on here. This is basically the same insulation that I use for sound insulation in the doors and on the floors. It's sticky. It's got kind of a tar to it, and it's going to keep those wires from rubbing on the heater, and it will keep the heater from heating the wires. So hopefully that's a good solution. You notice I've got wire management going along the shaft of the windshield wiper unit. That's an internal deal, so that's not going to rub on it, but I'm using that as wire management to keep these wires up and out of the way. And that little black tube you'll see right there is a brand new windshield wiper tube that we also installed when we got this dash out. All right, so then the wires, they continue on over here, and that's the bundle that connects to the dash sub harness. Now in the back there, let me flip the phone to the other side of the car, but you'll see that's the inertial switch. Let me go over that in a minute here. All right, so over here on this side of the dash, you have a couple of components that are kind of critical. This right here is the dash voltage regulator. Basically, it sets 10 volts instead of 12 volts for the dash, for the fuel and for the temperature gauge. So that's what these wires are for. I went over that on my last video. This device right here is the inertial sensor. Basically, what that does is if you get in a wreck, in any kind of a sudden jolt, you get hit sideways, left or right, or you run into something, there's a little ball in here that falls off of its perch, and it will turn off the fuel pump and the ignition. And so that's what that little device does right there. So that's kind of critical. If that's not connected properly, you can see there's some wires here that go to it. These white wires here, they come off and they go in there. You'll find those, they come off of the main harness and they go right to the inertial switch. Here it says right on there, it says, inertial switch plunger must be fully depressed for fuel pump to operate. So there's a plunger. See the top, there's a plunger. So if for some reason you turn the car upside down and that plunger goes upside down, the fuel pump will turn off. But let's try to keep the car right side up. That's my goal. I forgot to mention the flashers. This square one with the brown is the hazard flasher, and the green with the light green, this one is your regular turn signal flasher. So in my case, I have a round one because it's a replacement, but the originals are both square. You see the way that one would have been right here, but since I have a round one, it wouldn't fit round peg and square hole, so I just strapped it off with a zip tie. But anyway, there you go. Really quick on the flashers. The brown one is a hazard flasher. Brown wires are typically connected directly to the battery with no fuse, and they don't rely on the ignition switch. So this will allow you to run the hazard flashers even if nothing's running. And the turn signal flashers are only run when there's power to the car. So there you go, flashers on the Firewall. Okay, let's go ahead and get the dash in, and we'll walk through the contact points and how to install the gauges that have physical connections. All right, so this is where it gets a little tricky. Now you notice I've taken the steering wheel off here. I suppose you could probably do this with the steering wheel on, Although I think just from a matter of filming, it's easier to do it with it off, but I think overall the task would be easier with the steering wheel off. You can see this is the harness. I'm not going to connect it first. I'm going to just push it down in here. This is where the harness is going to connect, right here. So once I get this in place, I'm going to reach underneath and connect these two parts of the harness. It'd be way easier and give you a lot of room to wrangle stuff. Let me see if I can get a good focus. Here's where the two connect right here. And I'll be able to do that from underneath a whole lot easier. So the physical connections that you need to make, one is the speedometer cable right here, and that will connect right onto this little threaded dealy here. And the other one is right here. This is where the oil pressure gauge goes. And if you look in here, you'll find this is the little copper cable or copper tubing that connects to that. I'm going to go ahead and prime this with a little oil just to make sure that there's not a lot of air in the lines. When I turn the car on for the first time, I'm going to want to make sure that I have oil pressure, and I don't want to have to wait for the gauge to get caught up. And so I'm going to run a little oil into this just to prime this this little copper tube with oil before I connect that. I'll do that off camera, but just FYI, that's probably not necessary, but it's something I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut away from here, and then I'll connect these two, and then we'll slide everything up in there. Notice my handy bucket coming in handy again. I don't know how many times I've used a bucket just to hold something up. When I did the bumpers, I used a bucket. When I did the exhaust, I used a bucket. These buckets are just a irreplaceable component when you're working on these cars. So make sure you get yourself a couple of buckets. All right, so I got all those connectors connected, and so now from underneath the dash, you can see this is the dash sub harness connectors. You have this little purple one goes to the sensor. Actually, yeah, this little one is the purple one here. Will go with this other purple one here, and those are connected to. So I have that there, yeah. Those are connected to the switch for the door when you open and close the door. These other two, you can't get them wrong. One's a male, the other one's a female. So go ahead and plug those in to their respective mates. And then the last thing to do here is on the bottom, you see there's these little connectors that connect the bottom of the dash onto this cross member here. There's two here on the driver's side, one right here. I don't know if you can see it. One like right over here, and then there's another one underneath the dash panel. You can see that right there. And so you connect those, and that keeps the dash from moving on the bottom, pivoting off the top. There are the bolts across the top. You have to reach in there with a long socket wrench with an extension and tighten those down. I believe those are 1/4 by 24, so make sure you got the right size nuts going on those. You don't want to strip them. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and connect these, and then we'll do a summary. All right, so there you go. That's the installation of the dash. Quick review. Last week we went over the dash sub harness for the dash. Once you get all that wired and you run it out the back, you put the wires in the back so you can connect those from the bottom after you've installed the dash. The dash has about a half a dozen bolts that go across the top. They go into little slots. They're 1/4 by 24, and then there's 1, 2, 3 positions where the bottom of the dash is connected to that cross member that goes across right here. These are connected inside the heater tubes, and if you recall, I insulated the heater tubes so that the wires and the heater were insulated against each other, though the heaters wouldn't put any heat on the wires, and the wires wouldn't rub on the heaters. So hopefully that's a good solution going down the line. Next thing we're going to do is the center console up in here. We have to do a little bit of rigging here, because we're going to take the overdrive switch, which would normally run down the shift lever, and we're going to run it up into the dash, because we're going to have a manual switch for the overdrive. So that'll be kind of a little rigging that we have to do. The last little bit of wiring is the column, wiring the column, and we got ourselves a new switch and sub harness for the lights. This is the light switch, which goes on the column over here, and so that's it. That is the installation of the dash on a 1977 MGB. If you like these videos, please comment and subscribe. I really appreciate all the response that we get back. I like the debate, and I like the input. It helps me with my projects, and I'm sure it helps others working with their projects. So please do contribute. Thanks much. Have a good day.